I was thinking the other day about that scene where I say, I'm a type A, and I tend to break things. And it just occurred to me, it wasn't just the character, it's me.
I never know how to answer except for like just obsessions. I think when I first read an article, I mean, it was a very boring, normal way to make your first feature film, but it was an article I read in Harper's Magazine about people controlling the weather. Every film is a reaction to the previous film in some way. So I make this sort of normal, more traditional film about a big subject, scientific and issue related and all that stuff. And then the next one was, well, I got to do something completely different and personal, and made a film about my sister. And then I always had wanted to make a wrestling film, and so that was Fake It So Real. And then Actress was really sort of after those three films. I had, I didn't really know what to do next, but the ideas were really starting to build. I had no money and I worked with a company that was supportive. I was editing feature films for them, for their films, and I was on their payroll, but there was no way to raise money for Actress, so it was just, this person is next to me and she's very interesting and she sort of plays into some of these ideas of filming an actor in a documentary. That's a cool idea. And then that was Actress. And then from that point on, the pressure of like what the next film was going to be was higher because more people were paying attention after Actress. And for the first time, someone might be anticipating what I would make next. Maybe it's 5 people, but there was 5 people who were anticipating what I would make next. And so I went back to some old ideas, some ideas that I had sort of thought about forever with the Christine Chubbuck story. And then Bisbee was another idea that those are both of those ideas were things that I had been trying to figure out a way to make a film about for a really long time. It sounds flip, but the real reason I make documentaries is because I hate writing screenplays so much. I wrote a screenplay one time, and I thought it was good, and it was terrible. And then I gave it to my friend who was a writer, who was writing screenplays himself in college. We were in college at the time. And he was reading the screenplay, and then I remember having this terrible feeling that this was the worst idea, was letting him read this. And so I rushed over to his house. I literally grabbed the copy of the screenplay and I threw it in the dumpster next to his apartment. And that was it. I was never going to write a screenplay again. And I mean, I write a lot for my movies, but I don't find the process of structuring out something to be pleasurable at all. So what do you do, right? Like, so, for me, I feel like I'm more like, this sounds a little funny, but collaborating with real things that are happening to create whatever the film is, and that's developed. So like I said, Owning the Weather was much more traditional, but then from that point, it was very structured, very narrative ideas, just to one degree or another, but built off of these real moments. And I realized that you could direct real moments. Like for Katie with an I, we had 3 days with my sister, and so what are we going to do in those 3 days? Well, pool parties and sing-alongs in cars and going to the mall, and these are all things that I knew she did anyway, and that I asked her to do for the sake of the movie. So it's very directed in a sense, and that was more exciting to me than anything. My films are also about they're about America, absolutely. They're about the U.S. And I mean that not in a dumb way, like I really care about the place that these films take place in. The movies are just as much about the places as they are about the stories of the people, right? So Alabama or North Carolina or Beacon, New York, or Sarasota, Florida, and of course Bisbee, it's named after the place. And to me, when you drive around the U.S. or when you are with someone, we're all sort of geared to think about the movie images that would come to mind when you're doing the thing. So when you're with teenagers in Alabama, you're thinking about teenage movies, or with Actress, it was very much about a domestic sort of melodrama of a when you're thinking about what it's like to be Brandy in that upstate New York feeling, So, I mean, to me, and all that comes to a head with Bisbee, which is, in a way, all the characters in Bisbee are in their own movie, in a way. You have some who are thinking that they're in a Western, and some that are thinking they're in a musical, and some that are thinking they're in a telenovela, and some that are thinking, and that's partly by design. I like the idea that everyone's collaborating in that way, but it comes from them, like, I'm going to ask you some questions, and okay, well, I'm in a movie then, and so, well, what does that mean? Well, I'm gonna react like I'm in a Western or a musical, so that's actually coming from the people themselves. When I talk about fantasies and reality, I think instead of thinking about documentary as like a sort of long history of trying to get to the truth, it might be better to think of it as a long history of trying to articulate our actual fantasies of what we imagine ourselves to be, filmmakers, audiences, and subjects, what all sort of parts of that triangle imagine themselves to be doing. And oftentimes when you're filming someone a documentary, you're saying that you're getting something truthful, but those people on the other side of the camera, the subjects, are thinking of themselves as being in a movie. They're thinking of themselves as movie characters. So what movie characters do they imagine themselves to be? And that's interesting. I think Brandy imagined herself to be in a melodrama, and I think Fernando from Bisbee, he imagines himself to be in sort of this like kind of music video thing. So it's kind of fun to it's kind of fun to capture that actual truth and turn that into what you're doing. That's changed for each movie. I think the early films, it seemed really crucial not to mention the camera in some ways. Although I don't think you can watch Katie with an Eye without thinking about the camera. You're thinking about the way the camera is looking at her the whole time, because that's what you're getting over 3 days of a regular life, quote unquote regular, right? You're getting this is a real person living their life, and they have a relationship. This camera is there to capture it. The camera is obviously directed to be there to capture it. So you're thinking about the camera. You're certainly thinking about the camera with Actress, and deliberately so. I never wanted to be a character on screen in Actress. I didn't need to be, because the camera was she's obviously talking to this person behind the camera the whole time. And what does that mean? She has a relationship with the camera, which becomes a relationship with you, the audience, in some ways. But then with Kate Plays Christine, I'm in the film, and you see the setup more. You see it becomes important because of the structure of the film to see me as the instigator of everything. I wouldn't want you to think that Kate was the instigator of those ridiculous situations that she found herself in. And for Bisbee, it becomes even deeper, which is we're obviously instigating so much of what's happening on screen that the cameras become sort of sucked into the whole thing. And the final sequence, you see all of us. You see the cameras. Whereas some people might want you to escape into this world of the big reenactment of the deportation itself, we go the opposite direction. We want you to absolutely be thinking of this as something that's being captured, being created. The intervention is being done to the people. It's being done to reality. You know, intervention is one of my favorite words to use for a documentary, because there's no better. What is a camera doing other than intervening into people's lives? And that can be a productive thing. It can be a counterproductive thing. It can be a thing where you're in control, or it can be a thing where you kind of lose control. And there's a little bit of losing control in Bisbee, I think. Sure. Oh, I mean, if you think about, like I said, documentary, instead of a pursuit of truth, it's a pursuit of fantasies. One of those fantasies is my fantasy. One of the things about Actress is it's incredibly collaborative. You know, so Brandy and I worked really closely to create that movie, but in the end, it's not her Beacon, New York that you see. It's my Beacon, New York that you see. She loved Beacon. She loved that place. I mean, she left. She's still there now. She's happy to be there. I left as quickly as I could, you know. But in the movie, it's presented as this dreary sort of place where, you know, it's very sad and snowy and cold and miserable. That's the way I saw Beacon. Absolutely. I loved much of the town, but I felt that the place was oppressive to me, you know. So you're seeing, as much as it's a portrait of Brandy, it's a portrait of me and my own hang-ups and my own psychology, my own, and I think that's always the case. I mean, that's not a surprise, you know, all art is self-portrait, right? But in documentary, we don't tend to think of that. We tend to try to push as far away from that autobiographical element of documentary, and I think it's impossible. So instead of backing away from it, I'm leaning into it. You know, the aspect of acting in a documentary, what I found, and the same goes for Bisbee and Cape, you know, from Fake It So Real on, there's a great. It's a wonderful thing to make a documentary with actors, because it actually, in my mind, strengthens the idea of acting. In a fiction film, most of the time, acting is escapist. You're supposed to be sucked into the character and the story, and it's not good acting if it's not. Of course, there's great traditions of, you know, Brechtian acting that is absolutely about adding elements and layers of awareness into the performances. But when you put an actor in a documentary, you get to have the benefit of the great performance, but then also get to think about the layers built in, you know. To me, that's like why pro wrestling is better than sports. You know, in sports, the acting is the acting is to take you into the game. You know, but it's still as much acting as it is in pro wrestling. But in pro wrestling, it's about the acting itself, which is more fun for me. That's an interesting, I mean, really exciting way to describe it, you know, and I'm glad it's happening that way, right? So there's a moment, because the films are meant to, especially Actress and Cape with Christine and Bisbee, even to a lesser extent, but still, where the films are deliberately asking you to ask all these questions, and you question. Why am I watching this? What is the relationship to the camera? All these things. And I found it to be unethical and immoral to not infuse the films with these questions. And maybe that comes from having made Katie with an Eye, where those things were not nearly as in the foreground. And I wish they were, kind of, because it's such a delicate film, and it's still so emotionally draining to make that film and to watch it and to be a part of it. It's so close to me that maybe it felt really important to build in these uncertainties, because I think that's one of the most exciting things about nonfiction is uncertainty and questioning and layers, like you're saying, are as important as story and character for documentary. It's an incredibly fruitful art form because of that, because the questioning, the ethical questioning, the constant sort of like, I don't like the provisional idea of documentary. It's always an attempt at something. It's always, you're always watching an attempt at something, whereas it's not a full vision. You don't judge. We judge, you know, sort of great directors by their complete vision. In documentary, you're judging the attempt at a vision, and it's always feels like there's a tug there. It's you're trying to pull through, and I want to take the first bits of films and really put all that to you and say, I want you to see the tug. I want you to see the labor that goes into this. But then at some point, you do all this work, and hopefully if the films work for you, you do all this thinking and all this labor. You're wondering what's real, what's not, what's structured, what's storytelling, what's fictional, what's all that. And then you click in, and then all that knowledge that you bring hopefully takes you to this place where you then can be sucked into some other experience that's not about the intellectualizing of it. It becomes an emotional experience at that point. But you can't forget those intellectual ideas. You can't forget those layers, and hopefully it takes you into some other place. Because I want my films to be emotionally resonant. They're not academic exercises. That's dreadful. But I do think that you could build up the layers of thinking so that the emotional payoffs are complex, not uncomplex. So many times people, all they want to do in stories is make it not complex. You just want it to be a payoff. You just want it to suck you in. You just want to be lost in it. I want you to be constantly questioning, even as you're having these emotional resonances. Cubism is so pretentious to talk about it, right? But that is absolutely important. To me, that's the dimensionality that's always lacking in documentary. We want to make films about reality, right? But there's a whole other way of representing reality, as we were taught by the great painters, and those great painters taught us that coming at it from multiple perspectives at once and collapsing those perspectives gets you some other sense of reality, and it might be a deeper sense of reality. So few documentary filmmakers, I think, understand what's actually happening in the exchange when someone's watching a film. You're watching this film, and I called it today, outside of the mise en scène, outside of that, it's all the thinking that goes into all that stuff. And that is a great opportunity for us to get that cubist version of reality, charge those particles that are outside of the frame. It totally depends on each film. So, and Shauna is a big part of it. In Katie with an I and Fake It So Real, so much of it's his cinematic language that are framing those shots. I shot half of Fake It So Real. We had 2 cameras running at times, and we would hand the camera back and forth. But I'm just doing an imitation of Sean in a way. I knew by that point, even I knew his material so well that I knew how he shot things. And then for Actress, I shot most of it, but I was doing an imitation of Sean in a way. Kate Plays Christine, he shot the whole thing, and it's very much his vision. And then Bisbee is a break. Bisbee, we went a different direction entirely. Jared Alterman shot the film, and it's his vision. For me, there's no precision in the framing of Katie with an I. There's no planning. It's the planning, I guess, is, hey, let's get a sing-along in a car. That doesn't tell you that Sean, who's 6'4", is going to sit, down there and create this incredible 2-shot and then be able to give me all the variation that I can cut that scene together. His ability to capture light is unparalleled. Actress was a combination of highly prepared things, but even the prepared things, they were there's a scene where she's walking around the house, and then she takes, and it's all slow motion, and her daughter comes and gives her a clothes hanger, and she holds it above her head, and she kind of does this move with it and walks out of the frame. And that looks incredibly staged. It's not. It's I said walk around. It was Sean was shooting, and I said just walk around the house. She walked around the house. She's a little bit tipsy. She'd been drinking, and then she thought Stella had ruined her shot, and so she was like, "Ugh, Stella," And the way it plays, though, with the music and all that, it plays as this incredibly thought out domestic melodrama thing. So that's the most exciting thing for me about documentary is that if you are in tune with your material, it looks more planned and staged and more thought through than it even is sometimes, and actually I find the best documentaries, like think of the films of Frederick Wiseman. They look so rich with mise en scène, but he's not planning any of that ostensibly, but because nonfiction just by its nature is so much richer, it's no novel could capture the richness of Welfare. Or maybe in fact the great novels and Welfare have more in common but certainly no fiction film written and directed by a human could ever get the depth of Welfare. I think its documentary itself lends itself to more complexity and more layers than less. That's one of the reasons why I love the form so much. As the films developed, I realized I'm making them. I don't really particularly like being in production. Katie with a Knife, Fake and Surreal was so quick. It was really fun to go shoot something for a week and then be done. I was really excited about that. Actress took 18 months of filming, but it was little bits and it never felt overwhelming. I never felt like I was in production. I was just, I was literally walking next door to my neighbor's house and filming, and filming short things and then editing as I went, But the last two, Kate Plays Christine and Bisbee 17, they were both, much more traditional productions. 3 weeks we made both like fiction films where they had schedules. And we compressed everything into the time of the schedule. So we had 3 weeks to get everything for Kate Plays Christine, which is insane. So the whole time I'm just thinking of how to cut it together. And I had no idea really. So the discovery of, and Kate Plays Christine, it starts with her at the desk and then we go back to the desk. That wasn't a plan thing. That was me pushing record on a shot that Sean didn't even want to shoot. It was like, I don't see why you're going to get this shot. And it turns out to be one of the, the important structural device that gets us to the end, which is her at the desk, discovered in the edit. But I feel like I'm, hunting and gathering scenes, and that can be very frustrating for my collaborators because sometimes I'll be insistent that we have to get something and then there'll be no chance that it's getting in the movie, but for me it's a process of like I need to have everything that I could possibly want to use, and then I get that, and then it's miserable and I get really depressed and I hate it and I don't think there's any way that I could cut this together as a movie, but I'm obsessed with all the pieces that I could be getting, and then I sit down and then I'm in my happy spot and I could edit 15 hours a day. It makes me incredibly happy. That's where I feel like, I have this amazing material. I'm so lucky to be able to put it together. Maybe I'm a control freak and I want to create the world as I see it. But that's where it's like, I very much think of like, okay, what's the first thing the audience is going to see? What are they going to think? Well, if they think that, then we should upset their expectations by this. And then if they're thinking this, let's definitely upset their expectations. To me, it's always it's a job of having the audience settle into something and then move them to somewhere else. Because I don't make plot-driven films in a sense. Like Bisbee 17 starts with a long scroll that says, this is the entire movie. Basically, this is everything that you would want to know happened. So people are like, what? And then it starts with a comedy segment after that. And then from that, it's always about undercutting, because that's a way, the energy that you're to, the pacing and energy, the only way that works is that the next scene has to be a discovery for the viewer. Every single scene has to be a discovery. If you're not making a plot where, so-and-so gets thrown into a prison cell and then you're cut to, something else happening, then you go back to the prison cell and like, what is going to happen? Is he going to break out? Like, if you're not making plot-driven films, you have to create narrative energy, and you do that by constantly undercutting expectations and changing the game. Like Kate Plays Christine, every single scene is a comment on the previous scene. Every single scene is, you only can understand this scene if you've seen those 7 scenes in a row. And it becomes quite fun to then be like, okay, each is their own episode in a way, and that's how I think of it. And it's very exciting to be able to edit like that. And so I edit very quickly. I love to edit fast. I make movies very fast. I love in Mulholland Drive when all of a sudden we're just watching two characters watch a singer sing. And for me, that was just such a revelation of how you could use music. It's present, it's real, it's there, but it's also driving the emotion, and oftentimes it's driving the emotion in ambiguous ways. Or there's many examples. Or even in Chantal Ackerman's films, she's reading. Ackerman loved to set up reading of letters. Because when you could see someone read a letter, it's throughout her films, people reading letters. And when you see someone reading letters, you're seeing one remove from their reality, and you're seeing them perform the sort of the preconceptions that come with a letter. And I think the same is for music. You could read so much in the preconceptions of music, and then it becomes for actress and Kate plays Christine and Bisbee, all three of those films. It's very much about the genre of the mode of the film. So it's important for actress to have melodramatic music so that you're thinking in terms of melodrama. It's got to be the music's got to be too much, it's got to be over the top emotionality, because that's exactly what she was going through. And I'm using that as a character, like you said, to take the viewer and put them inside Brandy's head. And Kate plays Christine. I mean, it's a psychological thriller, so we had great fun with using the music to heighten the sense of psychology. Bisbee, it's an epic Western musical thing, and so and those last two films, I've worked with Keegan DeWitt, who is the composer. He does Alex Ross Perry's films. He's done many other films. He had 3 films at Sundance that he composed this year. And he and I have this incredibly organic way of working together, where he basically gives me sort of soundscapes and songs and music, and sometimes I just lay them in exactly as is and I edit to them, and sometimes I'm taking bits and pieces of what he's done and remixing them, and he lets me do that with his music, which is just really collaborative. So music is a huge part of it, and it's a trick too, because documentaries are supposed to not be driven by music in the same way, but bullshit. It makes it more fun and more it takes you in a more cinematic place, especially music as good as Keegan's music. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's next. I mean, I feel like Bisbee 17 is the end of something. Both Kate plays Christine and Bisbee were made. They had to be made. And that sounds like they felt to me, Actress was made at its own pace. And to me, that was the first time I felt in control of anything. I felt like this is a meeting of ideas and observation in a way that is this is the kind of movie I want to make. This is who I am. The other movies were leading up to that moment, right? And then once you know who you are, it's great pressure, and it's an awful feeling in a way, like, okay, well, now I know who I am. Now I'm very bored with who I am, right? And so Kate plays Christine, I had to make it almost as like, well, I felt like I had seen something in documentary. At the same time, I felt like I had seen that you could dramatize all those layers. You could dramatize all the questioning, all the ethical uncertainty, all the feeling of sensationalizing. I mean, the film absolutely is a sensationalistic film, deliberately so. You could collaborate with collaborators, and they can take the film in directions that you would never predict. Kate and Sean both took the film in drastically different directions. All the actors that we interview took the film. So, and I just felt like I had a vision into something that other people weren't seeing, and that I could use that to basically, like I said today in the class, like, burn it all to the ground. Like, the very idea of storytelling might need to be questioned. And I felt like I had a documentary way of doing that, and that was really exciting and harrowing, truly, because I felt afterwards I may not be able to make another movie again, because the end of the movie is basically saying, why are you fucking watching this, and why am I fucking making this? And that was a hard thing to actually go through, like, physically and emotionally, and sort of, and the film had a great reception. I'm someone who reads every word written about the movies that I make. which is not a good thing to do, especially not a film like Que Place Christine, because it's all in my head so much, and so it felt very, very personal. But I think they were right. I think the people who defend the film are right. I think people who attack the film are totally right. I think it's an exciting movie, and the smartest thing anyone ever said about Que Place Christine is that it's critic proof in a way, because you can't say anything about that movie that the movie's not saying about itself. And maybe that was happy that I did that, almost like knowing that. But then Bisbee was sort of like, I didn't even want to make a film. And then the 100th anniversary of the Bisbee deportation came, and it was like, like I said, I had to make it. And so there was the only one time we could make Bisbee, and I've been thinking for 15 years how to make this movie. So I don't know what to do now. I only think that I have ideas, but I need a break. These movies were all made over, I made 6 feature films in 7 or 8 years. And that is, exhausting, and I need a break. So maybe I'm done. Yeah, I think one way certainly is to work with actors. The other possibility is to make something super personal and just go back to, because I do miss the intimacy of actress and Que Place Christine. I miss that intimacy. I miss that feeling of being really close with someone, and the benefits that can come from following someone and feeling close with them. There's less closeness in the last 2 films, and maybe that's the next step, or maybe I don't know. But I really do need a break.
I can catch malaria.
What's that? Who is me? Oh my God. Someone very excited to be talking about these ideas. It's really embarrassing to have a retrospective of your work, because it's like, who am I? But having said that, I'm really excited by the ideas, I don't love my first film, Owning the Weather, but it's a movie about ideas. It's very much about ideas, and I like the idea of making films about ideas. I think it's actually hard to make films about ideas. I think people want to see characters and stories, and that's an easier thing to understand. But when you make films that are actually about the process of thinking through movies, thinking through the images, I think I have a passion for media literacy. I think if we understood how to read images better, we would be a better place. This world would be better. And I think documentaries can be very dangerous because no one knows how to understand them. They're actually quite dangerous things. Luckily, not that many people are watching them, but those that are being convinced that they're watching reality instead of something just as staged as fiction films. And so I've taken this battle, this is my hill to die on. Maybe I'm already dead, but this is my hill that I'm now a ghost on. Basically trying to vigorously tell as many people how to watch documentaries. And I teach, I write about films, and I make films, and all that's towards the one goal, which is, what is this really? What is this form really? And the truth, of course, is these questions are built into the form from the beginning. The most famous early documentaries were all staged. They were all acted, but they were called nonfiction. So this is not a new question. This is just a question that we've somehow still asking ourselves because we haven't moved on. I want to move on. I want to help move on. I want people to move on.